There are unanswered questions in this world, mysteries that need to be solved, crimes that people don't know what happened. And what I learned today, thanks to Chronicles of Crime 1900, is I'm probably not the person you want to call to help you with them. Chronicles of Crime 1900 is a standalone game in the Chronicles of Crime line. A mystery is presented to you via a mobile app, which you use extensively throughout the course of the game. The components consist of an evidence board, locations, a deck of characters, potential evidence, and items to be found along the way, and a new to this edition, deck full of puzzles. Each card has a unique QR code that you use within the app. Characters can be questioned about any other person or item in the game. The crux of the entire game relies on the app. The app is central and completely necessary to playing this board game. You can scan to go to a location. The app gives you a tidbit of information along with a list of characters who can be found there, as well as all narration that goes along with the story. You then can scan characters at that location to begin to talk to them. Then scan any other card you have encountered thus far to ask them about it. Also, you'll have the chance to investigate a crime scene using the app as a window into the virtual world. The story unfolds in front of you with the use of deduction, assistance from NPCs, and sometimes a decent amount of luck. While the bulk of the work is done digitally, the physical components act as a way to visualize suspects, characters, items, and locations. Each interaction you have eats at a ticking clock, because in this game you're a reporter that has to have an article by midnight, at which point you have to answer a string of questions pertaining to the case you've just played. Now, some of the stuff I'm going to say pertains to the Chronicles of Crime line as a whole. This is the first time I've reviewed a game in this system. It is dead simple. I don't think there's any game in my entire collection that I've been able to set up and play quite as quickly that wasn't like a simple dexterity game. And saying that, Chronicles of Crime is not necessarily a simple game. It's just with the heavy use of the app, it walks you through exactly what you need to do. I don't even know if I've completely read the rulebook through its entirety because it wasn't necessary, especially with the introductory scenarios. In the base Chronicles of Crime, they have it. In Chronicles of Crime 1900, they have a separate scenario. And while that scenario is simple and it's maybe a little over-explanatory, it does exactly what it needs to do in an interesting setting and still presenting you with a case, with actual gameplay, albeit simpler and not quite as long as a full case that you might encounter. I mean, it's taken, 20 years for us to figure out how to use QR codes, and by golly, Lucky Duck Games has finally done it. It's so incredibly smooth, and the app works so well with the QR codes in terms of interviewing people and getting information based on different things and specific things. A similar game to this is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, a game that I really enjoyed for a while, but ultimately got rid of because it was, this is going to sound so lazy of me, it was taxing. I was having to flip through books and look through physical evidence, which certainly was part of the appeal of the whole thing. But when I played a case and set it down for a few months and picked it back up, and I had to look through old cases and try to remember bits and pieces, it wasn't smooth. And it reached a line that I have for some of these story-driven games, where at what point would I rather play this as a video game? Computers can do fantastic things, and certainly the analog appeal of board games is massive. But if it gets to the point where the analog appeal is getting in the way of the storytelling elements of a very story-driven game, it isn't worth it to me. And Chronicles of Crime has tackled sort of the most difficult thing in these story-driven games, especially games where you're trying to solve a mystery that involves interacting with different characters or going to different locations. That's part and parcel to computer games and has been for years. And they've always done it better until something like Chronicles of Crime comes along. Now, because the system's simple does not mean that the game itself is simple. You can know how to play it and not play it well. Case in point, myself. And honestly, the reason I haven't played Chronicles of Crime sooner than I have, because it's a fairly recent system to me, is because of that app. I like playing board games. I'm semi-averse to the idea that I am going to be reliant on a piece of technology that may or may not be updated in the future to play a game. After playing the first scenario, not only of 1900, but of the original base set of Chronicles of Crime, which is not necessary to play 1900, those worries were gone. Like, yeah, I can have all those concerns that maybe the app's going to go, not be supported in the future. Maybe there's, only a limited amount of things that I can do in the game. In particular, the base game, I'm not super worried about running out of content because the way that the whole system works, there's that deck of character cards. But each of those characters could be different from case to case. In one instance, someone could be, the dead body, but in the next case, they're the star witness or they're the baker down the street. It's a system that is vague where it needs to be and specific where it needs to be. And that specificity is where Chronicles of Crime 1900 differentiates itself from the base Chronicles of Crime by the introduction of these puzzle cards. And while I'm not 100% sure about this one, I know in the base game, you could have community-generated content. Someone could write their own stories, plug in the QR codes for each specific character, and write their own scenarios for Chronicles of Crime, which is awesome. Like, that was the fact that there's community-based stuff. Lucky Duck Games is releasing DLC content, so you can purchase just digital cases and not need to go get a physical expansion necessarily, although there's plenty of physical support for this game. That was cool. Which brings me to my first concern of 1900, and that is the new element of these puzzle cards. Because some of these puzzle cards are generic, ciphers. They're things that will help you crack a code. But then there are other parts that are very specific to the case that you're dealing with. Which means that not every one of these cards is going to be reusable. It's a minor concern, but it is something to note, especially if you're already concerned about potentially running out of scenarios or running out of content to play. And if that is your concern and you haven't dived into this system yet, you might want to check out the base Chronicles of Crime game. Because I feel like that is, well, obviously it's been around the longest, so it is the most supported system thus far, has the most expansions for it, as well as community content. Now, one very important question that you need to ask yourself that I'm already very aware of for me is, are you good at this type of game? And if you're not, is that going to bug you enough to deter you from wanting to play it? The addition of the puzzles was cool. It really added to the flavor of the scenarios that are available right out the gate. Now, I am curious to see how further content can incorporate those, whether that be official expansion or fan-made scenarios, how you can recycle some of those. And maybe it can. Maybe if you're making a fan-made scenario, you include a PDF file that you have to, print off. I don't know. And if I'm not selling you on 1900, check out the base game Chronicles of Crime, which is a modern-day setting. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Check me out on social media. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and pretty active on most of those platforms. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next time.